charge for.
Oh, that's thanks. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Asheville City Council work session. I'm going to turn it over to our manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, afternoon, whatever time it is. We appreciate you all taking the time. This will be our second budget work session, and I want to welcome staff and those who may be joining us online. We have one more to go on April 8th before we present the draft budget in May. Today, we're going to focus on two things. Pretty much restoring the fund balance, a strategy for restoring the fund balance or our kind of savings account back to the policy recommendations of 15%. And we're going to also discuss some potential options for salary increases for city employees. I'm going to now turn it over to our finance director, our budget manager, Lindsay Spangler.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm short. Okay. All right, hi. Nice to see everyone again. Let's start with our key takeaways. All right. So at our last work session, we discussed with you all that in order to balance the budget for next year, we're going to need to do both some budget reductions and also a property tax rate increase in order to both balance and to keep our fund balance at the recommended level of 15%. So as we noted, there's still a lot of uncertainty around our revenue estimates, and so we're still continuing to refine those over time and evaluate different funding options, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. In previous sessions with you, we've heard that there is a desire to explore what it would look like to give a compensation increase next year to employees, and so we'll be showing you a few different options for what that looks like, and then we will see what that translates to in terms of a property tax rate increase for the community. All right, so I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the current year and where we are and some economic indicators that have changed since we last spoke. And then we'll take a little time to kind of recap from the previous work session on March 11th, make sure we're kind of all starting from a similar place here. And then Tony's going to come talk to you guys about compensation. We'll do some background information on that and talk about all the scenarios that we are going to lay out for everyone for next year, and that will all include public safety pay plan adjustments that we're recommending. And then lastly, we'll go through what that means for property taxes. All right, so a few new indicators have come in since we last spoke. So here's our unemployment chart. The blue line is this year, and the yellow dotted line is last year. So you can see huge spike in unemployment during the immediate aftermath of the storm, and it has been decreasing since then. There's a slight uptick in January, although if you look at prior years, that's very normal for Asheville. There's always a little bit of an uptick in January. So nothing too concerning there, but we still are pretty far above our pre-storm levels of unemployment. And so, but the good news is that the state Department of Commerce has released some information, and their prediction is that they think Asheville will be returning to pre-storm employment levels by the end of the calendar year. So it's great, if true. Another new piece of information we recently got is the December sales tax collection. So if you recall, this indicator is collected on a 3-month lag. So right now, December is the best we have. Sales taxes, as you can see, they were already down pre-Helene, and then you had the big decrease in September and October. Now it's going back to still down from the previous year, but definitely better, and still approximately 6% down to date from prior year. All right, and we wanted to provide just an update on what the city has spent so far on Helene response and recovery. So far we've spent about $23.3 million, and that includes personnel, operating, and capital costs. And then there's an additional $17.3 million in funding that's under contract. And then so far, we've received about $10 million in FEMA reimbursement. And we also noted here that we are expecting to receive a loan from the state that $2.8 million, and that funding can be used on FEMA eligible expenses. It's meant to be a bridge loan to help with cash flow while we wait to get FEMA reimbursement. Right, so now we're going to just all do a little talking about what we discussed in our last work session. So none of this should look super different from what we've already seen, but we're just gonna go through it. So looking at our revenue projections, property taxes, these are collected by the county, so we're relying on their numbers here, and so far they're expecting the city to lose $1 to $1.5 million in revenue last year compared to this year. We're still working with them to refine that estimate, but this is what it's looking like right now. Sales tax, we saw that on a previous slide. A lot of uncertainty there, and so right now we're predicting a range because there's so much uncertainty. So we're expecting a range of about 0 to 5% below the current FY25 budget. So that is up to $2 million. Other revenue sources, there's a little bit of movement here and there, but overall pretty flat compared to the current year. And so overall, what that means is a $1 to $4 million revenue decrease from our budget this year. And again, we're trying to review these projections as best as possible with the information we have. We're getting more information every day, and we're reviewing other funding options as well. And hopefully by the time we get back to you guys at the next work session in 2 weeks, we're hoping to have a more strong projection for you guys to review. Here's that information I just said, but in a chart. You can see the decrease in property and sales tax, and then kind of little changes in all of the other revenue sources. All right, so on the expense side, budget staff instructed departments to keep their operating budgets flat compared to the current year. And so my team really worked with each department, going line by line through their budget to see where decreases were possible, see where things might be delayed, see where purchases could be decreased. And so that exercise was pretty painstaking, but we were able to make a lot of room in the budget during that process. But we're still looking at a situation where there is about $4.1 million in unavoidable cost increases that we have to account for on the expense side, and that's mostly driven by healthcare costs and some state mandated retirement increases, as well as some other inflationary things going on. And so to help offset those increases, we showed you folks last time, there's about $4.4 million in cost reductions that we're recommending for next year. And this is that list. This is the same list that y'all saw at the previous work session, so I won't go line by line through it, but just to remind everyone, the savings that we're anticipating to take for next year with minimal service impacts to the community. All right, and so here's the kind of the bottom line that we thought is very helpful for people to keep in mind as we go into the next part of our conversation. So if you look at that last column there, you'll see that even after we take the $4.4 million in savings, there's still that gap between revenues and expenses. So our expenses are anticipated to be $11.4 million more than our revenue. And so without anything else changing, that means that we'd need to use $11.4 million of our fund balance to make up that gap. And that would leave our fund balance at about 10%. So, and as a reminder to everyone, the city's policy is 15%. So what that means in terms of a property tax adjustment, if we wanted to get back to that 15% fund balance level, it would require an additional $9.4 million. And so what that means, it translates to a 4.65 cent increase on the tax rate, which translates to an impact of about $163 per year to the average homeowner in Asheville. So we'll pause here for some discussion. What we've heard previously from you is that we are going to move forward with recommending a budget that helps us to maintain that 15% fund balance and with a tax rate increase to match that. And as I've mentioned before, we are continuously refining these estimates. We really hope that we can get that tax increase to be lower by refining our estimates, by finding additional sources of revenue, and hopefully by doing that, we can get that 4.65 cents down or be able to restore some of the proposed reductions. Right, I will pause here for any questions. Hearing no questions, I will move on. And I will have Tony come talk about compensation.
All right, thanks, Lindsay, and good afternoon, everyone. Tony McDowell, Finance Director. Appreciate Lindsay kind of going through and giving you all a recap of the budget work session from last time. And really our goal there was to kind of level set in terms of where we are financially. We wanted to remind everyone, since it has been a couple weeks since we talked to you all, kind of where we're at right now with our projections. So the next part of the presentation today, we're going to talk about compensation and benefits. And just want to start, as always, and remind everyone of the importance of compensation and benefits in our budget. It makes up about 64% of our general fund budget. That includes salary and wages. It includes the benefit costs for health insurance, retirement, 401k, Social Security, Medicare. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you all, we have invested fairly significantly in our compensation and benefits over the last few years. So this chart goes back to fiscal year 2018, 2019, so 6 years ago. And you can see the percentage increases. And again, this includes increases for both wages and benefits. And a lot of this started when we implemented the Archer pay plan study in fiscal year 21-22. That led to some fairly large increases in pay. And then those have continued over the last few years as we've tried to adjust salaries as inflation has gone up as well. And as just a reminder, these numbers do include benefits as well, and so all those increases related to healthcare and retirement are also included in this as well. So again, just a reminder of some of the things we did for the current fiscal year. So this was during last year's budget process. We did some specific increases for firefighters and for the police pay plan. So for firefighters, we did a flat dollar increase of $4,053 for beginning on shift firefighters. And then other firefighters received increases as well for an average of about an 8.8% increase in the fire department. For the police pay plan for the current year, we did a 6% across the board increase for all employees on that pay plan. And then for employees on the general pay plans for the city, we did an increase, what we call a hybrid approach, where we did a flat dollar amount for certain employees below our median salary and then a percent increase for folks above that. And so what that meant was our lower paid employees in the current year got an increase of approximately 6.3%. And again, that came at a cost of about $6.6 million in the general fund. So where did that leave us in terms of living wage status? And this is something we talk about typically every year as we go through the budget process with you all. And the metric that we use for living wage here locally has traditionally been the Just Economics information that they provide. And so we wanted to kind of give you all in the community kind of an idea of where we stand with the current Just Economics living wage amounts. And so they do two amounts. They do a pledged living wage, and then they do a full living wage. And so for 2025, if you take their pledged living wage amount and you turn it into an annual salary, that comes out to approximately $39,520. So the good news is with those adjustments that we made in the current budget cycle, I should say last year's budget cycle for the current fiscal year, we actually don't have any full-time city employees who currently earn less than that $39,520. The full living wage amount for this year is approximately $48,152. And we do have some employees here at the city, and I'll show you on the next slide exactly how many. But we do have some employees who do remain below that full living wage amount. And to get everyone up to that full living wage would require an increase of approximately 19%.
Tony, thank you. Have you ever looked into other certification programs and seen how we align with their criteria?
Yeah, we haven't. I know there's others out there. There's a variety of others out there, but we haven't specifically looked into those others, primarily because I think this has been the one that folks here locally have focused on as we go through the process. But happy to take a look at those as well.
I'd be curious. I don't know if my colleagues are.
We've had this discussion in some of the check-in meetings, and I think this is kind of staff trying to accommodate a conversation that tends to happen every year more on a political level about what the benchmark measure should be. And so they're just trying to get ahead of that conversation because some years we ask for it deep into the process and they're kind of playing catch up. So if we wanted to ask for a full examination of how living wage is done and what's a better benchmark, if there is one, we could do that. Do you all think that would be worthwhile? My personal sense is that what we're gonna hear from the community is we don't really care what those other programs say the benchmark should be. We care what our local group says the living wage salary should be. I mean, that's just my sense of it, even though I know it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, and Mayor, you're absolutely correct. We want to make sure that we got the data shared with you all early in the process this year so you all can kind of get a sense of where we're at.
Since you're asking, it should be no surprise that I support us using the local calculation based on the cost of housing, especially because the living wage calculation with Just Economics is the 4-county region. So we would still have people driving maybe 45 minutes to work.
Okay, so as I said, on this chart, we wanted to just kind of show you all where we're at. We currently have about 1,260 total employees at the city, total full-time employees, I should say. And we have folks here who are in various different pay plans. We have non-exempt folks, salaried employees, and then we have employees on the fire and police pay plans as well. You'll see if you come over to that, I think it's the third or fourth column. Again, we don't have any employees currently below the 39,520. I think at this time last year, we had about 16 employees below that level. So we've, with the increases we did this year, we don't have any employees below that level. We do have about 184 employees on the non-exempt pay plan who are currently below that 48,150. We don't have any on either the police or fire pay plans currently. You all may remember part of the adjustments that were made this year were to bring those starting fire and police salaries once they're on shift up to where they were the same. And you can see that in this chart where they're at 50,309. So again, just kind of a snapshot of where we've been, a little bit of history, kind of where we're at now to kind of set the stage for the discussion about next year's compensation options. So as we started looking at strategies to bring you all, or options to bring you all, again, y'all had indicated an interest, I think, back at the retreat in exploring potentially a compensation increase for city employees this year. So as we kind of thought through the strategies and the options, we really wanted to kind of focus on certain things, right? So we wanted to make sure that the options that we brought y'all were affordable within the current fiscal climate, and that they helped move employees closer to market rates, that our proposals continue to progress us as an organization toward achieving an annual living wage for all full-time employees. We wanted to make sure that we recommended options that minimized impacts to compression, and we also wanted to focus on moving away from the step-based public safety pay plans. So those are kind of our guiding principles, if you will, for the options that we're going to show you all today. So again, so we prepared a variety of options, compensation options for you all to consider. Included in these options are proposals to move both police and fire off of their current step plans. So what we are here to do today is to show you all some of those options and seek your input on any issues or concerns that you may have with those options. And then we'll come back to you all the next work session on April 8th and hopefully get a final recommendation and a final direction on compensation at that work session so that we can go back then and begin to finalize the city manager's proposed budget and bring you all that in early May. So I'm going to start by talking about those adjustments in public safety. We do have folks from police and fire here today. If you all have any specific questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer those. But just a little bit of background for the public safety pay plans. So both police and fire have been utilizing what's called step-based pay plans since the early 2000s. Those pay plans, those step plans were developed prior to the Great Recession, back when the city's compensation adjustments typically included both a cost of living adjustment and a merit-based increase. And so the way it was designed to work was the cost of living adjustment would move the pay plans up, and then the merit adjustments that the officers and firefighters received would then allow them to move through the step plan. So you would start off, let's say, at a step 0 in the police pay plan. You would get a merit increase based on performance, and you would move up to step 1, step 2, step 3 through that method. But since the Great Recession, the step plans have not functioned as they were initially intended, primarily due to the lack of the fact that we haven't had a merit-based pay component to our adjustments ever since the recession. And that's primarily due to financial constraints. So over the past year or so, both APD and AFD have worked with Human Resources, the Finance Department, and the City Manager's Office to develop some proposals to move away from these step plans to more of a career ladder pay structure. And this career ladder approach will assist with retention in both departments. It will help, particularly APD, with lateral recruitment to recruit folks from other departments into APD. It will help address some of the compression issues in both departments, and it will provide a clear career progression track that encourages professional development for staff. And then kind of overall, this change is aimed at improving job satisfaction, incentivizing experienced staff to stay, and making it easier to recruit qualified personnel. So those are kind of the goals. I'm going to talk a little bit about each pay plan specifically and the adjustments for next fiscal year, and then we'll pause, let you all ask questions and have some discussion. So for the APD pay plan adjustments, again, to move them off of the current step plan to the career ladder, there are some immediate compression issues that will need to be dealt with if we make that change. So there will be some salary adjustments that will be required in fiscal year 26 to make this move. Most of those compression adjustments will occur in the mid-ranks, so it's not going to be for officers at the highest level or entry-level officers. On average, the increase across the pay plan for APD would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 7%. What APD is proposing is that anyone who did not get a compression adjustment next year would get an adjustment under the new pay plan, and they would receive a one-time bonus up to 3% of their pay. The total cost for this proposal is a little over $1 million, and if we pursued this adjustment, APD staff would then not receive any of the other compensation increases that we're going to be talking to you all about today. So this would be the extent of their compensation increases for next year. So for AFD, they are proposing to address compensation within their pay plan over a 5-year period as they implement these new career tracks. And while the career ladder advancements and compression adjustments may lead to additional costs in future years, AFD staff currently believes that there will be minimal budgetary impacts to move them off of their step plan in FY26. And so therefore, AFD pay adjustments for next fiscal year would align with what we are going to propose or and council would recommend for general employees. So just to kind of summarize, and again, we'll pause for questions. Both APD and AFD support moving away from the step-based pay plans to pay structures that include a career ladder. Implementing this new career ladder approach in APD will require some compression adjustments that create an additional cost next fiscal year. Currently, AFD has not identified any significant additional costs to move off of their pay plan next year, but there will be additional costs as we move forward. And those will occur really in both departments. So with this career ladder structure, if that's the direction we go in, there likely will be some additional costs in future years as staff begin to achieve some of the advancements and pay increases that come along with those advancements. And then the last thing I'd point out is even with these compression adjustments that are being proposed in APD this year, they still will remain below the market rates that are out there for other municipalities. And so I'll pause here, and the question we'll ask here is, does council have any concerns with staff continuing to develop proposals to move both APD and AFD away from the step plans to a new career ladder pay structure next fiscal year? And again, happy to take any questions, and I've got support here with me today as well to answer any detailed questions you all might have.
I have a question about what you were just finishing up on, the future impacts of the change in plans. Have you done some analysis that we're able to see on what the next 5 years would look like?
Kurt, you all to chime in on that.
Haven't done any in-depth analysis, but the way it works is every 5 years, you would move to the next level. There's 4 levels in the patrol division, there'd be 2 in the detective level. So we're gonna move everybody where they are supposed to be during the implementation of this plan, and then you wouldn't feel the effects of that until, a couple years down the road. I think when we initially looked at it, it was 2 to 3 employees over the next 2 to 3 years, and then it's kind of spread out because we have such a wide variety of experience. But every 5 years, you would move to that next level.
Well, let me rephrase a little, because I'm thrilled to see that the departments and city manager's office have been working on this together across AFD and APD. I thought that was excellent. What I'm really trying to get at here is, can we afford it in 5 years? And if we have any math behind it. I just, just in understanding the bigger shift over time.
Yeah, I share that concern. It seems like we would need 5-year budget projections.
Yeah, I just want to understand it. Because I think if it's something you all agree on in policy and procedure, home run. I just need to know the math before I can really understand.
And it's not every 5 years, every employee moves, right? So you've got one employee who's got 1 year of experience, so they've got 4 years to hit the next step. Then you've got an employee who has 4 years of experience. Okay. So next year you might have 2 to 3 employees. The following year you might have 10 employees.
So it's a really moving target. You may not really be able to assess.
Well, how different is that from what we do now? Tony, can you address, we always have, I thought we always had movement and maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, we do, and we do have some departments that have a career ladder in place now, and you all right, it makes it difficult sometimes to project accurately what the cost is gonna be. I think we can look ahead, I think knowing what police and fire are looking at and how many employees they think are gonna make progressions through this, we can definitely do some projections about what those numbers are gonna be. We haven't looked closely at that yet. We wanted to kind of get through this initial process first and then kind of take a look at what those numbers might be. So, but I do want to, Mike, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to.
I think, so my concern is, let's say a person has 1 year experience and then they have 4 years until they meet that next 5-year pay increase, but they get a bachelor's degree during that time. Are these pay increases tied to any training or education that they're getting? So in other words, can they kind of accelerate that process before the 5 years?
They can't accelerate the career ladder, but they do get incentives, the education incentive. All of those incentives stay in place, but they have to meet a minimum of 300 training hours every year and have a satisfactory job performance within that time period before they can move on to that next 5-year level. And we do have the predictions fairly ready for Tony to look at over the next 20 years. So I do have that. I just don't have that on hand today.
And I think these pay plans are getting closer to pay for performance.
Yes.
For fire and police, we actually, and I think when we had policy, finance, and HR, we were talking about merit increases, going back to a merit pay plan for all city employees. So we're getting closer to that with the APD and AFD.
Yeah,
If
the
you are.
onus is on the employee to
Correct.
to excel to that next
That's
level
right.
to get that 5% increase. If they don't, they just stay where they are.
Okay, so I'm just making sure I understand. So let's say you have that officer that comes in with an associate's degree. And in that 5 years, you want them to do X amount of trainings and maybe get a bachelor's degree, but they don't. Would they stay at that level at 1 year, or would they go to that 5 year just automatically? Because when I was speaking to and hearing from some of the officers, they were saying that the pay increases didn't feel like they were tied to anything concrete. There wasn't like an education, like an associate's, and then they get this, and a bachelor's, and they get this, or they get CIT training, and they get this. And that's what I was hearing more that they would want, but you're kind of moving it towards a time-based table.
No, education is separate. The education incentive is completely separate from this career ladder. The career ladder is based on your training, law enforcement specific training, 300 credit hours. And if you're talking to employees, they only preliminary know that we are presenting a proposal to get off the pay plan, but before we really went in depth with what that looks like for each employee, we wanted to make sure that council supported us to do that. So they only have a very small glimpse at what we're trying to do, but there's a lot, there's a worksheet that they have to fill out, that they understand exactly where they are. We've laid out what they need to do to hit that next level. It's laid out, it's there, we just haven't presented it yet.
But we would not be taking away those other incentives.
Correct.
Yeah,
So
they
if you
exist
get
Be
a
on
bachelor's,
top of.
that's
Yeah.
on
Correct.
top of.
Yeah.
So it's like training
No,
and
on the website.
experience, and they move up the ladder?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so
And-
if they
and
hit 5
satisfactory
years
job
and
performance.
had a bachelor's degree, that would move them to a level. If they had 5 years and an associate's degree, that would move them to a level.
It's just an additional percentage. Is that
Correct. You can
correct?
have 1 year in associates and you get a 2.5% for an
It's a-
associate's
It's a
degree.
percentage on their salary.
Okay.
And you keep that percentage throughout. It has nothing to do with the career ladder.
Okay,
So people who have an associate's, a bachelor's, and master's, they're going to be higher than those that do not.
Don't do this, that's the
Throughout.
ladder.
That's the ladder, I get
They're
it.
gonna do
Level,
this
ladder.
is bigger.
so just to be crystal clear, so in that 4 years before the 5 years, if they reach one of those educational milestones, they could get a raise before the 5 years.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an
Okay, all
automatic
Yeah.
percentage increase.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is in
Also,
addition
if
to-
they're,
this is on top.
I like this, okay.
If they speak another language, if they,
Correct.
you have all kinds of things that add to your salary if you achieve them, that are outside the ladder.
Yes.
Okay.
Language incentives, education, certification incentives.
Sweet, thank
I
you.
do have two curiosities. One, because we didn't do the merit-based pay part that we had agreed to in the past, it would help me to know what the
Many
budget impact would look like if we had. Like, the
It would be
comparison,
hard,
I know,
'cause-
it's like, we didn't do it because it wasn't, there were budget constraints. But it would help me see what we're moving kind of in a direction of. The second thing is because I'm hearing that we don't yet have like that level of transparency in the process for the staff, is it possible that they might get into the weeds and be like, oh, actually, we don't want this, and then we have a last minute budget kerfuffle? So the sooner we can get into the weeds with the staff and make sure that we're all moving together would help me.
Yeah, I'll answer that first question about budget impact, and I'll let Jackie and Mike speak to kind of the timeline of when they were going to communicate with their staff. So it'd be really hard to estimate that, because we'd have to go back to 2008 roughly, so almost 20 years ago. And pre-Great Recession, the city typically did a 1% cost of living and a 3% merit. So since then, there were several years we didn't do anything because of the Great Recession, and then we started up again with something in the neighborhood of 2%. I mean, we could,
So
in
time
theory,
would probably be
probably.
better spent looking at a 5-year projection than going back.
Yes, exactly. So, but all right,
Understood.
I'll let you all speak to the communication plan.
Just in terms of the communication plan and even how we got here, was our goal is to avoid any type of grievances associated with pay, any type of pay adjustments for HR throughout the year, which happen regularly currently because of our step plan and because we are so compressed within our salaries. But what we did from the very onset of this is we worked with FOP and PBA and garnered their support for the plan. They have an in-depth look. They know what percentage every single employee is going to get, and they support the plan. And that was, it probably wouldn't be here without their full support, but they have told us that they support moving forward.
I think from fire side, our plans are very similar, but there are some distinct differences. First off, we have done the same. We are meeting with the Firefighters Association on Thursday to roll out the whole plan to them as well, so they can see what it looks like from our end and give us their comment, with the ultimate goal of reducing or eliminating any of the grievances that we've had in the past. But just a quick overview of how our plan is different from police's, so you're aware, is we took the 14 steps and got rid of that step program in our proposal, and we created 4 career tracks for each different pay grade in the system, from firefighter all the way up to division chief. And each one of those career tracks represents a different part of the organization, so that a firefighter in one part of the organization, like in operations, understands what's going on in the fire marshal's office or emergency management. So it's important to us to have a firefighter that's well-versed in all aspects of the fire department. So they would receive their raises based, or their percentage increases, based on completion of one of those career tracks within their pay grade. So, for example, a firefighter has a career track of community risk reduction, of emergency management, of EMS, and of fire. And so each one of those career tracks has a set of goals or objectives in there for that firefighter to accomplish. When they accomplish those goals, and then they would be eligible to ask for that career track increase in their salary at that point. So that replacing the STEP program. And for each level, we've identified different things. So for example, for us, the higher levels, captains and above, education is very important to us, since they're going to be managing a larger area. So as a result, each one of those, we have an escalating education clause from associate all the way up to a graduate degree, or a certification program for executive fire officers. So emergency management is clear all the way from firefighter all the way up to through division chief. EMS is very critical to our people in the field who are delivering care to our residents and visitors, so that's an early on part of the career track that we want them to get. And it would change as they move up into administration and education as you get higher and higher up. So that's kind of an overview of how our system is designed to work. But again, each career track, and it's not pay for performance, but those employees that want to excel in each of these career tracks become a more valuable employee to the entire city organization, and as a result, we reward them that way.
So,
That's great.
2 curiosities I have. One is, can you confirm that we're talking about this for the fire department for next year, not this year?
So the way it's designed,
Go ahead.
the way it's designed for this fiscal year, if it were adopted, so right now, up through this end of this fiscal year, it's no change, everything's the same. But then starting, if this were adopted, if this proposed plan were adopted, it would start in the next fiscal year. And we would not institute those career track changes for 1 year, because they need time to go do those skill sets to learn, to be able to claim one of those career
So we would
tracks.
pass it this year, but implement it the following?
Correct. That's why there's minimal impact this year. One of the components to the fire plan, though, is to start, if you will, baking in things like their advanced EMT certification into their base pay instead of making it a supplement. So we're transitioning away from some of those supplements and baking it into their normal salary as part of that. That would be so their EMS track, one of those EMS tracks includes advanced EMT, and that would give them the pay for that instead of a supplement to bake into their salaries.
But just for clarification, AFD staff does not have to wait a whole year for a pay increase. They would get
Correct. Correct.
whatever you all decide is the increase potentially for the general
For every
employees,
officer.
for everybody,
Yes.
they would get that as well.
I'm sorry for that confusion.
No, I didn't, you didn't
That's
confuse
helpful.
what
The
I'm
second
thinking.
question I had was, immediately after the budget vote last year, there were questions about if the outcomes were realized from what the vote had been. I guess there was maybe a potential misunderstanding, but regardless, there was a concern when the paychecks hit. Was that issue resolved?
I am not aware of any outstanding paycheck issues at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, I'm sorry. All the education advancements that we're referring to, do we participate in helping fund those? I'm just not aware. Do we have any tuition matching or anything?
Tuition reimbursement?
There is tuition, okay, great.
Yes.
And then the impacts to the fire departments over 5 years, does it change anything about their scheduling? Does it put to rest any of the 56 hours, 40 hours?
So this plan has nothing at all tied to the schedules at all.
Nothing
This
tied
plan
to the
is
schedule?
no tie to the schedule whatsoever.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
So, Deborah, I know the last work budget, we were talking about adding that fourth shift and kind of implementing that, and we were waiting for a study back from Chief Burnett. And I think he was former, and he was going to get it back to us hopefully by the end of March. And I was hoping to see that information.
Because that
Which would
changes
deal
the
with the
scheduling.
hours, the
Right, so
schedule.
that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm getting at.
So
too.
that report, I was told today, was provided to the firefighters association either yesterday or the day before. So that information is now, they now have that. I don't have access to it because it was their contract. I believe I will receive a copy of it here in the next couple days.
Okay.
And at which time then I could get into it and look
Okay.
at it, so.
But that is generally around scheduling and
That is
work hours. not
Completely around scheduling and work
Okay.
hours. Nothing to do with the pay plan.
Okay,
However, it could have a multi-year budgetary impact.
right.
So
Yes.
I just,
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure we are leaving ample time in the budget planning process to get all that information and not be at the last minute for everyone's.
I believe I believe I may have access to it within the end of the week. When I meet with the Firefighters Association on Thursdays, when I believe I'll see the first draft of
Okay.
it.
No, go ahead.
I think both, and this is kind of broader stuff, I don't know that I'll ask you a specific question, but I might have some for Tony. I really like seeing the thoughtfulness in both departments. I feel like I see a collaboration and a creativity of like, what can we do here? I know from being on policy finance the last several years that talking about merit-based pay is a way to go. When I was a city employee, we had merit-based pay, and I thought it was a really good model as an employee, as a public servant. You know, I look forward to talking more with firefighters and police about, okay, here's what we've been seeing, and kind of getting that input and kind of circling the conversation. So I'm supportive of us continuing to look into this. Definitely more questions, whether it's how would this AFD plan connect to a potential fourth shift? Also, to Sage's conversation or question of multi-year impacts, I really would love to have a sense of that when we're looking at impacts. So it's like, okay, these plans don't have much impact now, but might in the future. I just really, is that $50 million in the future? Probably not, but it's hard to make a decision now with like kind of a black box of the future. And I understand future projections are really tricky, but in a future conversation, I really love some technical guidance on how to think through that, because I don't want to flip-flop because we realize in several years that we didn't ask those questions. And then other questions I have, and this might be more to my peers, is I'm really thankful to be on a team where we've been really focusing on public safety and public safety servants the last several years. And I continue to feel a little concerned that like, we don't have a public works union and we don't have a water employees union. And would we be having conversations with their pay and with their proposals if there were? So I'm really thankful to our fire and police unions. I think y'all do good work. I think you help us have hard conversations. But I would be curious, whether it's this budget or the future, like, and what's the next big idea for those departments? And what are those employees advocating for? And I think that they've gotten a lot of benefits because we've continued to really pull together hard budgets so that we can reward our employees. But my sense is that they're well beyond below market pay as well. And so I think looking at the whole team and understanding that is important. And I don't think I want to flip-flop between, well, this year we're doing public works and then we're doing water. Like, that feels hard too. But I just want to lift the question of particularly water and public works, transit. It's been a hard couple years for everybody. So it's a little bit more of a rhetorical to share where my heart and head is with my peers, while signaling continued interest in getting more data on this before we make a decision.
I appreciate all that. My last question is about the former part, so if anybody wants to comment on that. Could you jump to slide 18, please?
Yeah. See, I can't see my numbers on this.
It's
slide.
way up, it's the compensation history,
Okay.
2018 to 2025. Up, up,
Oh,
up.
there's
There it is, that one.
okay, yeah.
This one, I guess really overall, I would love to see this kind of projection. I know it's hard, but could you add years there and be like, we know with the amount of staff we have and just even a 3% increase every year, this is what we're looking at? Because I'm trying to figure out just the rising cost of Asheville,
Yeah.
the rising cost of everything.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah, and we do a 5-year projection, and I think we actually shared that last year as a part of the budget process
Yeah.
as well. And we do try to estimate a percentage increase each year to salaries. And we can certainly update that and give that to you all this year too.
That would
That'd
help.
be great.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, that is including benefits.
Yeah, this includes
Yeah.
benefits as well.
And I know we thought it was going to be a reval year and all of these things, and now instead we have another natural disaster and stuff. But I'm still just trying to figure out when we can make the strong leaps that we know we need to make, and whether or not we can do it in these difficult years.
Yeah.
I would be curious, had we done a reval, what would that budget growth have looked like? Because if we're, is that like the next slide?
No.
No, you just had a funny little smile.
I wish it were. I wish we had a
I
reval
just-
slide that we go into,
like-
but,
Don't we all?
It's an uncertain time.
yeah.
The stock market is bonkers. We just lived through a disaster. We're still at 6% unemployment. And so no one has a magic crystal ball, but should there be a reval in the future? Are we
Yeah.
going to be looking at
It's
closing that gap
coming
that we
up.
just
Yeah, it's coming up. So-
experienced?
Yeah,
Yeah, so the
It's
county,
next
county
fiscal year.
voted to move ahead with it next year. So next budget cycle, when we're here talking to y'all, we'll be talking about a reval. And then, they will hopefully get back on the schedule of every 4 years after that. Ultimately, it depends on council's appetite for where they want the tax rate to land after reval. There's the revenue neutral tax rate, which keeps growth kind of what it would be in a normal year if council sets a revenue neutral rate. If you set something above that, then yes, you can get additional growth out of your budget in those kinds of years. So, and a lot of local governments do that. They do set a tax rate above revenue neutral during reval years, so.
So your question to us was, do we have any concerns with continuing to develop these proposals away from the step plans? And my only comment on that is, I love the concept. My concern is it the correct year? Do we have the capacity to do it in a recovery year, or should it be moved a year back? I don't know, but all that data and questions I was asking will help me get there.
So if there's no
So
other,
do you feel like you've got an answer to this?
so I think what we've heard from you all today is that we would, on April 8th, bring back this as a part of the package, that we will, recommendations, and then, hear final direction from you all on April 8th, and then we'll go from there in terms of finalizing the manager's budget, but I'll defer to the manager if she thinks differently.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I would be supportive of continuing to look at this.
That's where we are. And just for clarification, so we could move to the step plan administratively, but you all approve the budget.
Right.
So that's the impact. I mean, so we could implement it, but without
You need the
funding
funding.
it. Right. We need your support from the budgetary
Well,
perspective.
it doesn't, it's an unfunded step.
It's an unfunded step,
So, right.
right.
So.
That's
one-
why we're bringing it to you all, because it is related to the
It has a
budget.
fiscal impact.
It has a fiscal impact. Yes, ma'am.
One side note to this, for both for fire and police and fire, I know they're behind you. We're getting messages from the PBA up here saying they don't necessarily sync up with this direction. And also I don't have a message from fire, but I always worry about that too. So everybody go talk to your buddies and make sure everybody's actually on the same page, because it makes it hard for us if there's kind of a last minute if the group that wants it isn't in sync with each other about what they want. I know.
And we have tried really hard this
I-
year to make those
Yeah.
connections.
Well, and I
just
will
wanna
say,
go on
in the
record.
past, one of the most challenging things has been the complexity of the ask. Last year, you all asked for 6%. That was really easy. Fire asked for some kind of matrix I still don't understand to this day. So, but then also sometimes you get a little difference of opinion within the group.
No, and generally with the PBA is very supportive of the concept of the career ladder that we're going to. They wish it could be for more pay to try to address, not only the folks that are suffering from compression from the police step plan, but also just all the employees generally overall. So we are really trying to be fiscally responsible in addressing where the need is right now, and then hopefully being able to move to closer to market maybe in the next year or two. So that's where our discrepancy is with the PBA is they like the plan itself. They just wish it could address compensation more
You're trying to be
overall.
cognizant of what we can reasonably absorb.
Yes, we're trying to be cognizant of recovery right now.
Well, that and the PBA also specifically said it addresses 2 of our 3 objectives. And that's where I say we garner their support, because to me, that's support for the plan. And the third, my understanding is they would like to see longevity yearly in place. And this is a way to achieve that, without doing it yearly. And it gives you some onus on the employee to work toward their performance and their career goals.
Just one last request, I guess, for Tony, really. When you do come back in April, can we also get an update on vacancies for some of these?
Sure, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, if that's simple, I don't mean to add a lot of work, but,
Okay, if everyone's comfortable, I'm going to move on then to the next part of the presentation. This is really the options that we've developed for general employees, so folks not in APD, but this would include AFD employees. So we kind of modeled 2 approaches for you all. It's what we call the percentage option, which is an across-the-board percentage increase that every employee would get, every full-time employee or permanent part-time employee. And then there's the hybrid option, and that's the option we utilized this year, where if you're below the median salary, you would get a flat rate increase. If you're above the median salary, you would get a percentage increase. So we modeled 3 different levels for you all to consider. The first is the 1.5%. So if you just do 1.5% across the board, that's one option. The hybrid approach to that is 1.5% for everyone above the median, and then an $870 flat amount for everyone below the median. 2%, again, 2% across the board. The flat amount would be a little bit more, $1,160, or 3%. I think this is what we showed you all last week. 3% across the board, or $1,740 flat amount added to base pay if you're below the median of $58,000. And what the hybrid approach does in all these, again, is lift up lower paid employees at a higher percentage than the others. So for example, the 870, the first example there at 1.5%, the $870 amount would provide an increase higher than 1.5% for those at the lowest paid level in the organization. So what do those cost? So we ran numbers on that. So obviously the 1.5% option is the cheapest of the 3 options. It's approximately $2.15 million for that option. The 2% and the hybrid options in each of these do cost a little bit more than the percentage options, but at the lower levels, the difference is really not all that great. But at 2%, it would be about $2.5 million for either the percent option or the hybrid option. Then at 3%, it would be $3.22 million for the percent option, or $3.33 million for the hybrid option. Again, not much difference in cost, but in each of these examples, the hybrid option is a little bit more expensive. So pros and cons of these approaches. So the percentage option, the pros of that is it does provide an increase to base pay, which helps progress us toward aligning salaries with market. It's standard for all employees, so it's simple to explain, simple to communicate, doesn't add any additional compression within the pay ranks, and it's a low administrative burden in terms of HR and finance implementing those pay changes. The one con we identified, and again, this is a con compared to the hybrid option, is that it doesn't lift up lower paid employees more than other folks in the organization. And then similar on the hybrid approach, One of the pros is the same, again, it continues to increase salaries, base salaries, so it helps us move toward market. This one does provide a higher increase for lower paid employees. The two cons here, there are some, a little bit of compression that's created for employees who are right around that median salary. So the difference there, so the folks slightly above and the folks slightly below the 58,000, and it is slightly more expensive than the percentage option. And then finally, to take those numbers and turn them into tax rate increases. So for the 1.5% option, again, because the numbers didn't vary that much between the percent versus hybrid option, we didn't break those out separately. We just showed them on the same line here. So, for example, with the 1.5%, plus doing the APD adjustments that we discussed earlier, that would be about a 1.08 cent increase on the tax rate, $38 a year for the average annual homeowner, and that comes to $3.15 monthly. So you can see the examples here. In the last slide here, we layered in the 4.65 cent tax rate increase to keep us at 15% fund balance. And so again, the options here range from the 1.5%, which would be about 5.7 cents on the tax rate, up to the 3% option, which would be somewhere around 6.25 to 6.3 cents in terms of a tax rate increase. So I will stop there for discussion. Happy to go back to any of those numbers. I know I went through those charts pretty quickly. Our questions you all here would be based on the information that's been provided. Does council still want us to continue pursuing compensation increases for staff? And then do you all have any concerns or issues with the proposed approaches? Or would you like to see additional information or scenarios before or at the next work session?
In the past couple of years, I'd asked for a document that took a little bit of time, and it was not just the vacancies, which have been mentioned, but like vacancies by department and within the pay grade. And I think with the spirit of that I'm trying to really wrap my mind around is, if we continue to not keep up with living wage, based on the cost of housing, it's gonna make it really hard over time. The projection of the number of employees who are gonna be able to afford to live here, we just get further behind. So I guess what a different way to approach this might be, if we went with the hybrid plan, the language you use is it gets us closer to market. But a number that might help me wrap my mind around it is, how many of those over 100 employees that are below living wage would it get closer?
Oh, the 184.
184?
Yeah.
So that is a great
So
question.
is it like 132? Is it 55? Like,
Yeah, and we sort of looked at the numbers already. I'd have to go back and get you more exact numbers, but when we looked at it a week or so ago, we have a lot of employees right around $46,000. And so under the 3% option, they don't quite get above the 48, but if you do the hybrid approach and give them the flat amount, we actually move quite a number of people above that 48,150 living wage. And so that number of 184 employees goes down pretty substantially. We can get you those exact numbers.
because that would help me understand if, like, we want to retain and recruit people in Parks and Rec and Public Works and the sanitation and the water department, and like, that is the kind of 5-year projection that I'm looking at, is like, how do we not make that number grow?
Yeah.
And Tony, I just want to make sure that that number that we gave, the 48,000, that is for the upcoming year?
So that is for the 2025. So they redo the calculation, and I think it's in January of every year. So that's for this calendar year.
Okay, for the calendar year.
But we are, no one knows what's going to happen on the heels of Helene, but, we did hear our FMR was dropping 10%, but that won't hit until the July new FMRs are announced, and then living wage responds the following winter, right?
And
I think
they
that's
do
how
it.
they're doing it.
Yeah, and I think their calculation uses a 3-year average of
Right.
those numbers as well, so,
Right.
yeah.
But that 10% drop wouldn't be reflected till next year, I think.
Right.
I think I'm doing that right.
And I would add, we can certainly get that report, Councilmember Roney, that you mentioned. That one does take a little bit longer than just the spitting out, if you will, of the vacancies, where you have to go back and, categorize them by department and by pay grade, but we can definitely get that for you all. One thing I
guess I'm
would,
just thinking about the consistency, because you've already developed that program and metric, and so instead of asking for something new, it's just something we could look at over time.
yeah. one thing I would add, we are doing a hiring review right now, so there are maybe more vacancies right now than there would typically be because they come through the committee for approval, and so we are holding a certain number of positions vacant right now due to Helene.
So you are, that was going to be my next question, you are still doing that?
Yes.
And then,
And we plan to do it in the future. That's part of our savings.
okay. Because I'm kind of curious if there's vacancies that are like a year old and we've learned to operate without them. And maybe it's not ideal, but it's,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think, I can't say for certain, but I don't think there are many vacancies or many at all that we've held for more than a year. And
Okay.
if there are positions that are open, we look to repurpose those because staffing is tight right now. And
So what, are you changing your budgeted vacancy percentage overall?
We are, yep.
Do you know what that is yet?
Did we settle on a number yet for that? We'll see. The short answer is yes, we are
Okay.
increasing our vacancy rate for next year. That's part of those savings, that
Okay.
4.4 million in savings that we showed you all.
And then, I remember last year, just in our timeline, we talked about raises, then we talked about number of new employees. Are there any new positions being created in this budget that maybe weren't under fees and charges?
Yeah, we don't currently have any new positions funded through our regular budget. There are a couple that are being considered to assist with the CDBG-DR program that would be fully funded under
Funded
that
by-
umbrella. And a
okay.
couple that would be fully funded under FEMA reimbursement to help out as well.
But
So-
outside of these like recovery efforts, we're not
Correct.
trying to grow our staff with new positions this year? Okay,
No.
just wanted
No,
to make sure.
ma'am.
I know, great, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to finish up here, but then again, happy to answer any additional questions. So we're here on March 25th, and we'll be back to you all on April 8th at the next work session. That night, you'll also vote on the fees and charges for fiscal year 25-26, and then we'll be back with the proposed budget in early May. So again, I'll go back to the key takeaways. I won't go through these all again.
And Tony, before we go to the key takeaways, can we go back to those questions?
Yeah,
Because you all asked for a lot of information, and I want to make sure that we kind of get that first one identified, because all of that information really relates to kind of that question. It's in some way supports you all making a decision, and
Like,
we will
we
come
shouldn't
back
do
with
all
a
that research if the answer to
if
number
the
one is
answer's
no.
You
Right.
always simplify my questions.
Yeah, it's just, I hear what you're saying.
So the first question is on AFD and APD?
Well, that first
It
one up
is.
there.
Oh, the first one
is
here,
just-
not the. okay,
It's
got
just basically, do we want to pursue staff increases, compensation increases? And then, how many questions did we collectively ask? We asked a lot. Do we?
It's quite a few. I think Lindsay has a record of the number of questions, or someone, the budget staff.
Heather.
Heather?
Yeah.
Yeah. At least five.
Yeah. I wish there was a way to trim down the amount of staff work that has to go into this before we can ultimately make these decisions, but I don't know how else to
I
address
mean,
that.
we'll continue working, but.
I'm hearing general support, just wanting to understand the options and getting at some
And
of
impact.
how do we lift that lowest bracket again and be fair. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
That's good.
Well,
appreciate
and
that
yeah, I mean, it
clarification.
seems like, council, is everyone, on that question of number one, do we want to continue down the road of talking about some type of compensation increase for staff? I don't think
Yes.
I've heard
Yes.
anyone say no. Okay, yeah, so yes to that. And, in terms of the approach, I'm going to be leaning towards one of the hybrid with the flat rate for the bottom
Lowest.
and the percentage for the top. Personally, and it seemed the fiscal impact was it was a little more, but it wasn't much more. I think the bigger question, Tony, for me, is going to be how these numbers firm up as we go, we inch towards that June voting deadline
Yeah.
for a July 1 budget, because you're going to have this evolving picture that is going to tell you what these numbers and shortfalls look like, how big they are. So I'm hopeful you've presented the numbers in a way where we will see nothing but positive change, and they will tighten up. However, we did see unemployment for the whole state of North Carolina tick up, including our area this last month. So while sales tax looks better, some markers are negative, so we don't really know for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of economic uncertainty, even more now, not just, Helene related, but with, the changes in the administration.
Wait, what are
and
you
things
talking
go-
about?
What's that?
I'm just kidding.
So, yes, we're going to try to be very mindful of that. And I think one thing we definitely want to emphasize is we are still looking at everything, and there are some options that we're looking at on the revenue side that we haven't finalized yet, but we hope to be able to come back to you all on April 8th. We're kind of taking this approach of leaving no stone unturned on the revenue side. We know we've made the expense reductions that we showed you all already, but there's a couple things we're working on the revenue side where we hope we can shrink that 4.65 number for the property tax increase a little bit more, but we're not quite finished with our analysis on that yet. So we want to have firm numbers on that. But again, like you're saying, Mayor, there's still going to be a lot of uncertainty even as we move forward on that. One thing I'll add too on the, I think one of the things we can prioritize getting ready for you all before April 8th is looking at these three options here and looking at the hybrid approach. We can tell you all approximately how many people that would lift above that 48,150 number, and we can do that pretty quickly, so.
Yeah, and I really want to reemphasize what Tony just said in terms of us taking the really, really deep dive, sharpening our pencils and asking departments. We think we have really, really got the departments to a point where I don't know that there's much left that they can offer up, but we are looking at other programs. We're just looking. And because we know that to support a salary increase will take a tax increase. And so we want to be as responsible and empathetic as possible and look at our organization from top to bottom. But we are not going to do things that are irresponsible and that adversely impact our community. We're not going to offer those up.
Did I see that the county is freezing wages for the year?
I know they're still working on their budget, obviously. I think they are going to be proposing some kind of pay increase for their employees,
Okay.
consistent with what they typically do around CPI and things like that. So.
Yeah.
And then I know in my check-in or whatever, what meeting it was, I had said, are we even looking at no increase? And I'm assuming that just was off the table. We didn't have support for that. And then I remember another council person, I don't remember who, asking about the bonus option. Was that looked at all or just kind of moot at this point?
Yeah, we did look at that option and showed you all the numbers during the 3x3s. And I think the feedback we got from you all was that you all wanted to take
To
that
go this
option off
way.
the table.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it was pretty expensive.
Yeah, it was going to be the most
and-
expensive of the various options too. So.
And it didn't lift the majority of
Correct. And it wasn't,
staff.
yeah, and it
and
wasn't added to base
compression
pay,
and-
so it didn't help
Okay.
move toward market and all that stuff, so.
Thanks.
Speaking of no rock unturned, this may be a little bit of a sore subject here, but I know there are 5 electric buses that are sitting in a parking lot taking up space. And I met with the transit workers this past week, and they said something about a $250,000 contract that we pay every year to a company just to let those buses sit there. And if that's not accurate, I know if I had a car that did not work in my yard, I could take it to the scrap yard and get at least a couple $100 for it. So have we thought about selling off, or doing something with those 5 electric buses?
Yeah, and we'll have to get more information on that. I don't know the details. I certainly hope we're not spending $250,000 a year. And we do surplus used vehicles. I think with buses, because we use federal funds to purchase those, there's some restrictions around that and whether the money comes back to us or goes back to the federal government. But we can definitely get more information on that.
Thank you.
And it's not across the board, because I have ridden an electric bus recently, so it's possible that that's a generalization. But I pursued that information last year, and I know there are restrictions for who you can sell them to, and the money doesn't necessarily just come back to us. Because it did seem like if it's not working for our topographical scenario, why wouldn't we sell them to a city that could at least use them for parts?
Okay, I
I think that's it.
think with that, we don't have anything else from our end, so unless there's additional questions from council, thank you all for
I
the.
still have the same question about strategic partnership funds. I know it's like pennies in the bucket considering our whole budget, but those are community partnerships and agreements that are really important. And these are, you know, youth in our community whose families don't have the ability to like scrap those resources together. So if it turns out that sales tax moves in a different direction, I hope we consider that as a top priority. I just want to name it.
We're trying. I promise you, Kim, we're trying. And I think I heard that from the majority of you all for us to look and to see. And that will be a priority for us with whatever amount we come up. It may not be our traditional allocation, but it may be some amount.
Something more than zero would be appreciated. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
I saw that the county was not going to make their annual contribution to reparations. I'm not necessarily suggesting we do that, but it makes me wonder if some of these other programs might have been a beneficial switch for the year. I don't want to put the two against each other, but it's just, did we talk about it to get it looked at, or did anybody talk about that?
I think
No.
we need some council direction. Take a look
Oh,
at that.
okay.
On the reparations, yeah.
Well, I only say it because in that one area, we don't have an active plan that we're pursuing. And the other one will see an immediate detriment to our community
Right.
partners.
All right. Well, again, thank you all for the time this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. We'll just start council early.
I know.
You want to start her?
Be home by dinner.
Sorry, we left y'all time.
Um,
No, it's good.